Hi everyone, I'm back with another exciting video, History Explorers. The famous Voyage of Columbus. Wouldn't have been possible without the support of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain. They provided ships, funding, and crews, motivated by the promise of wealth, spreading Christianity, and competing with Portugal. Columbus, in return, promised new lands and untold riches, setting the stage for one of history's most remarkable journeys. Isabella and Ferdinand are two of the most important people when it comes to Christopher Columbus reaching the Americas. However, their roles are kind of complicated. Sure, they gave him the money for his voyage, and without them there would have been no discovery of the Americas. But what did they get out of sponsoring Columbus? Let's find out. The first thing that Isabella and Ferdinand provided was ships. They weren't exactly known for their navies. At the time, Spain wasn't really a great seafaring nation. In fact, they didn't even have a navy. So when Columbus came to them asking for ships, they had to borrow 3 from a Portuguese merchant. You know, those merchants who were the ones making all the money during this time period. Anyways, these 3 ships were the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, and they were pretty small because they were built for trading, not exploring. The Santa Maria was 60 feet long, the Nina was 50 feet long, and the Pinta was also 50 feet long. These ships may not sound small to you, but during this time period they were. Like for example, compared to one of the largest ships ever built at the time, the Portuguese ship called the São Gabriel, which was 100 feet long, so almost twice as long as the biggest of Columbus's ships. Oh, and by the way, the reason why Spain didn't have any ships is because they spent all of their money conquering and ruling over Spain. Don't worry, though, I'll tell you about the other things they provided to Columbus in just a second. But yeah, these ships were pretty small. The next thing that Isabella and Ferdinand gave to Columbus was money. This is probably the most well-known contribution that they made. After all, they did fund his voyage. Although we don't know the exact amount of money that they gave him, historians estimate it was around $12 million in today's money. That's a lot of money, especially during this time period where you could buy an entire village for around $1,200. How do I know that? Because that's how much Christopher Columbus paid for the island of San Salvador. Yeah, he literally bought it. I guess that's why the natives thought that he was a god. Anyways, it was a lot of money, but not exactly the whole story. See, there was more to the funding than just giving him money and letting him go. No, they wanted a piece of the action. So they basically struck a deal with Columbus. He would give them 1/8 of everything he found on his voyage. And not only that, but they would also get 1/10 of everything he would earn for the rest of his life. Not only does that mean that they got a huge chunk of all the gold, spices, and other goods that he found, but they also got a percentage of all the money he would make for the rest of his life. Basically, they turned his salary into a royalty. Now, you might think that that's a bit greedy, but it wasn't uncommon back then. In fact, it was common. Just remember that he was basically renting an army from them. And if he found nothing, he would owe them money. Plus, if he found something valuable, they deserved some of it, considering they fronted him millions of dollars. So yeah, they funded his voyage and would get a percentage of everything he earned for the rest of his life. Now, so far, we've seen how they provided ships and money, but there's still one more thing. They also provided crew. Well, not like a whole lot of crew, but still some. Columbus only had about 90 men on all of his ships, and out of those 90 men, he brought along his own family and friends. which means he likely only had around 70 sailors and soldiers. Out of those 70 men, we know that there were at least 10 to 14 of them that were soldiers, meaning that he really only had around 50 to 60 sailors. And those 50 to 60 sailors operated the ships, meaning that they needed at least another 10 men to operate the ships while they sailed. So basically, he had less than 50 men actually working on his ships. That means that the other 30 to 40 men were likely there just for the voyage over. Like once they got to the Indies or wherever else he was going, they would stay there. So he really only had around 10 to 20 men to actually sail back to Europe with him. So yeah, that means that he needed more crew. And that's where Isabella and Ferdinand stepped in. You see, he originally asked the Portuguese king for some soldiers, but the king refused. So then he went to the Spanish monarchs, and they gave him 30 soldiers. But not only did they give him soldiers, but they also made him promise to convert the natives to Christianity. So not only did they want him to find gold and other valuable resources, but they also wanted to spread Christianity. Okay, now let's move on to why Isabella and Ferdinand sponsored Columbus in the first place. I mean, they were perfectly happy with letting Portugal take the riches of India, right? Wrong. You see, they didn't want Portugal to have all the riches of the East. See, during this time period, there was something called the Renaissance, which was basically a rebirth of ancient culture. It started in Italy and slowly spread to the rest of Europe. But anyways, it was all about ancient Greek and Roman culture. During this time period, people rediscovered Ptolemy's geography, which described the world as being round and having an antipodal land. Basically, he said that there were lands on the opposite side of the earth. And everyone thought that was awesome. I mean, they had been living in a flat earth for so long, and suddenly there were other lands on the other side of the planet that was huge. So they wanted to find those lands. And Columbus was going to help them do that. Of course, he didn't know that, because he thought he was going to get to Asia. But to them, it didn't matter. If he found anything new, it would be better than what they had now. They were hoping for things like gold, spices, silk, and other luxury goods. And of course, they wanted to get wealthy. I mean, who wouldn't want to be rich? But they also saw this as a chance to compete with Portugal. As I said earlier, they were happy to let Portugal trade with India, but they didn't want them to have all the riches. They wanted to be involved too. And the only way they could do that was by supporting explorers like Columbus. Lastly, let's talk about what Columbus promised them in return for their support. I mean, they weren't stupid. They knew that he would share whatever he found with them, right? Well, yes, but also no. I mean, he did technically owe them a portion of everything he found, but he didn't care about that. He was only interested in getting to Asia and getting rich. But in order to convince Isabella and Ferdinand to fund his voyage, he had to sweeten the deal a bit. So he told them that he would bring them back riches beyond their wildest dreams. I mean, he claimed that he would bring back so much gold that it would make them richer than the kings of France. Not only that, but he also promised them new lands to rule over. Remember, during this time period, everyone wanted land. There was practically no one left in Europe that didn't have their own kingdom or empire, and even the kingdoms and empires wanted more land. So when Columbus told them that he would give them new lands to rule over, they were sold. And that's how Isabella and Ferdinand became the rulers of the largest empire in history. All right, now you know how Isabella and Ferdinand helped discover the Americas. Click here to watch this video on the Mayans, or click here to watch this video. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure. See you next time.